And with that wonderful introduction, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming together to immerse ourselves in this wonderful, rich body of wisdom that's both written in words in a text before us and also is written in the faces of the people before us. And so we explore both. We explore both what's been written and what we have received and by word and what is being animated in the very presence of the people before us. We are going to read through our weekly Torah portion, which this week is Parshat Noach, which is in the book of Genesis in chapter 6, beginning with verse 9. We'll read through our English translation of it. I'll begin by reading a few verses, and then I'll offer other people an opportunity to read if they'd like to. After we've read through our entire portion, I will share with you a focused study about this week's portion, and then we will have our collective collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to unmute at this time, we can together recite our blessing, giving thanks for the opportunity that this moment gives us of receiving and contributing to wisdom. Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for the opportunity of this moment to share in the body of wisdom that is Torah, and to share in good deeds, in good words, and in good fellowship. I will share with you the opening lines, and then I'll invite others to do so as well. This is the line of Noach. Noach was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. When God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, God said to Noah, I've decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make it an ark with compartments and covered inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make an opening for daylight in the ark and terminate it within a cubit of the top. Put an entrance to the ark in its side. Make it with bottom, second, and third decks. Anna, would you like to read verse 17?
Thank you. As for me, I'm going to bring the floodwaters upon the earth to destroy all that lives under the heavens, all that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth shall expire. With you, though, I will establish my covenant. Go then into the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and their wives with you, and take 2 each of every living creature of all flesh into the ark, male and female, to keep them alive along with you. Every type of bird, every type of beast, every type of creeping thing, let 2 of each come to you to keep them alive, and take along edible foodstuffs of every kind. Gather them up so that there is food for yourself and for them. And Noah did just as God had commanded him. That is what he did.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 7? Steve, yes, Solomon here.
Thank you. And the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean animal, you should take 7 pairs, males and their mates. And every animal that is not clean, 2, a male and its mate. Of the birds of the sky, 7 pairs, a male and female, to keep seed alive upon all the earth. For in 7 days' time, I will make it rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the earth all existence that I created. And Noah did just as the Lord commanded him.
Sherry, you want to read?
Noah was 600 years old when the floods came, waters upon the earth. Noah with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives, went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of the clean animals, of the animals that are not clean, of the birds and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 of each, male and female, came to Noah into the ark, as God had commanded Noah. And on the 7th day, the waters of the flood came upon the earth.
Thank you so much, Kath. You want to start there at verse 11?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst apart, and the floodgates of the sky broke open. The rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. That same day, Noah and Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, went into the ark with Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons. They and all beasts of every kind, all cattle of every kind, all creatures of every kind that creep on the earth, and all birds of every kind, every bird, every winged thing. They came to Noah into the ark, to each of all flesh in which there was breath of life. Thus they entered, comprised male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shut him in.
Thank you so much. Richard, to verse 17.
Thank you. The flood continued for 8 days on the earth, and the waters increased and raised the ark so that it rose above the earth. The waters swelled and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark drifted upon the waters. When the waters had swelled much more upon earth, all the highest mountains everywhere under the sky were covered, 15 cubits higher than the waters swell, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh that stirred on earth perished, birds, cattle, beasts, and all the things that swarmed on the earth, and all mankind. All in whose nostrils was the merest breath of life. All that was on dry land died. All existence on earth was blotted out. Man, cattle, creeping things, and birds of the sky. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark.
Thank you. And June, would you like to continue there at verse 24 and then take us into chapter 8?
Thank you, Rabbi. And when the waters had swelled on the earth 150 days, God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to blow across the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were stopped up, and the rain from the sky was held back. The waters then receded steadily from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters diminished, so that in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters went on diminishing until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out the raven. It went to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out the dove to see whether the waters had decreased from the surface of the ground. But the dove could not find a resting place for its foot and returned to him to the ark, for there was water over all the earth. So putting out his hand, he took it into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days and again sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came back to him toward evening, and there in its bill was a plucked off olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the waters had decreased on the earth. He waited still another 7 days and sent the dove forth, and it did not return to him anymore.
Thank you. Margot, would you like to continue there at verse 13?
Thank you. In the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the waters began to dry from the earth. And when Noah removed the covering of the ark, he saw that the surface of the ground was drying. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. God spoke to Noah, saying, come out of the ark together with your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh, that is with you, your birds, animals, everything that's on the earth, and let them swarm on the earth and be fertile and increase on the earth. So Noah came out together with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives. Every animal, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that stirs on earth came out of the ark by families. Should I run?
Please.
Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking every clean animal and every clean bird, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the pleasing odor, and the Lord said to himself, never again will I doom the earth because of man, since the devising of man's mind and evil from his youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living thing as I have done. So long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Thank you, Margot.
This is so good. It's such a good story.
Yes. Would you like to continue there, David, with chapter 9?
I don't think we
Yeah.
can hear.
David
David
Leib
Lieb?
or David Phillips? David Leib?
David Lieb, yes.
Oh, me, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you meant David Phillips.
Yeah.
We're at verse 1.
Yes.
God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fertile and increase and fill the earth. The fear and the dread of you shall be upon all the beasts of the earth and upon the birds of the sky, everything with which the earth is astir, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every creature that lives shall be yours to eat, as with the green grasses. I give you all these. You must not, however, eat flesh with its lifeblood in it. But for your own lifeblood I will require a reckoning. I will require it of every beast, of humankind too. I will require a reckoning for human life, of everyone for each other. For whoever sheds human blood, by human hands shall that one's blood be shed. For in the image of God was humankind made. Be fertile then and increase, abound upon the earth and increase on it. And God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and your offspring to come, and with every living thing that is with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast as well, all that have come out of the ark, every living thing on earth. I will maintain my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth.
Thank you so much. And Jim, would you like to continue there at verse 12?
Thank you, Rabbi. God further said, this is the sign that I set for the covenant between me and you, and every living creature with you for all ages to come. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature among all flesh, so that the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures, all flesh that is on earth. That, God said to Noah, shall be the sign of the covenant that I've established between me and all flesh that is on earth. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham being the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole world branched out. Noah, the tiller of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and he uncovered himself within his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a cloth, placed it against both their backs, and walking backward, they covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way, so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah woke up from his wine and learned that his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." And he said, "Blessed be Adonai, the God of Shem. Let Canaan be a slave to them. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be a slave to them." Noah lived after the flood 350 years, and all the days of Noah came to 950 years. Then he died.
Thank you so much. Steve Brenton, you want to continue there at the start of chapter 10?
Thank you, Rabbi. These are the lines of Shem, Ham, Japheth, the sons of Noah. Sons were born to them after the flood. The descendants of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tubal, Ashish, Keras. The descendants of Gomer: Eshkenaz, Ripah, and Togarmah. Descendants of Yavan: Abishah, Tarshish, Kittim, and the Dodanim. For these, the maritime nations branched out. These are the descendants of Japheth by their clans, each with its language, their clans, and their nations. The descendants of Ham: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The descendants of Cush: Seba, Havilah, Sabto, Ramah, and Sabtekah. The descendants of Ramah, Sheba, Dedan. Cush also begot Nimrod, who was the first man of might on earth. He was a mighty hunter by the grace of the Lord, hence the saying, like Nimrod, a mighty hammer by the grace of the Lord. The mainstays of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land, Ashur went forth and built Nineveh, Raboth Ir, Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city.
Thank you so much, Steve. Let me invite David and Susan if you'd like to continue there at verse 13.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mitzrayim begot Ludim. Is that right? We're in the right place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mitzrayim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Nephtuhim, Pathrushim, and Casluhim, from whom descended the Philistines and the Cretans. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, and the Girgashites, and the Hivites, the Archites, and the Sinites, and the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterwards, the Canaanite clans spread out. The Canaanite border reached from Sidon as far as Gerar up to Gaza, as far as Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah and Zeboim up to Lasha. These are Ham's sons by their clans, their tongues, in their lands, and their nations.
Children were born to Shem, him as well, father of all Eber's children, older brother of Japhet. Shem's children were Elam and Ashur and Arpachshad and Lud and Aram. And Aram's children were Uz and Hul and Gether or Kether and Mash. And Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. And two sons were born to Eber. The name of one was Peleg, because in his days the earth was divided, And his brother's name was Yoktan. And Yoktan fathered Almadad and Sheleph and Hazar Maveth and Yerah and Hadoram and Uzal and Dikla and Obal and Abimael and Sheba and Ophir and Havilah and Yohab. These are Yoktan's children, and their home was from Mesha, as you come to Safar, to the mountains of the east. These are Shem's children by their families, by their languages, and in their lands, by their nations. I can keep going.
Please, one more verse.
These are the families of Noah's children and their records in their nations, and the nations were dispersed from these in the earth after the flood.
Thank you both so much. Justin, would you like to continue there at the start of chapter 11?
Thank you so much. Yes. Now the entire earth was of one language and uniform words. And it came to pass when they traveled from the east that they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly." So the bricks were to them for stones, and the clay was for them for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make ourselves a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the entire earth." And the Lord descended to see the city and the tower that the sons of man had built. And the Lord said, "Lo, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is what they have commenced to do. Now, will it not be withheld from them all that they have planned to do? Come, let us descend and confuse their language, so that one will not understand the language of his companion." And the Lord scattered them from here upon the face of the entire earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore he named it Babel, for there the Lord confused the language of the entire earth, and from there the Lord scattered them upon the face of the entire earth.
Thank you so much, Justin. Let me invite Rose. Would you like to continue there at verse 10?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Verse 10.
Yes.
This is the line of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when he begot Arpachshad, 2 years after the flood. After the birth of Arpachshad, Shem lived 500 years and begat sons and daughters. When Arpachshad had lived 35 years, he begot Shelah. After the birth of Shelah, Arpachshad lived 403 years and begot sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he begot Aver. After the birth of Aver, Shelah lived 403 years and begot sons and daughters. When Aver had lived 34 years, he begot Peleg. After the birth of Peleg, Aver lived 430 years and begot sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he begot Reu. After the birth of Reu, Peleg lived 200 years and begot sons and daughters. When Reu had lived 32 years, he begot Serug. Looks like it's a Thurug. After the birth of Serug, Reu lived 207 years and begat sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he begot Nahor. After the birth of Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and begot sons and daughters.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Karen. Would you like to read a little bit? We're at verse 24.
Thank you, Rabbi. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he begot Terah. After the birth of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and begot sons and daughters. When Terah had lived 70 years, he begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now this is the line of Terah. Terah begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot. Haran died in the lifetime of his father Terah in his native land, Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nahor took to themselves wives, the name of Abram's wife being Sarai, and that of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Isaac. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and they set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans for the land of Canaan. And when they had come as far as Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah came to 205 years, and Terah died in Haran.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. If you have a copy of our study sheet, I invite you to take it out now so that I can share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll have our collaborative conversation about it. Well, this is a portion that's certainly full of all kinds of strong imagery, a lot of dramatic narrative, and contains stories that are very familiar to us about the flood, about the Tower of Babel. And I'd like to focus on one aspect of it, which is what we were just reading about regarding the building of this tower, which becomes known as the Tower of Babel. And I have that on number 1 on the study sheet, the verse from chapter 11. Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky to make a name for ourselves, else we'll be scattered all over the world. Well, I was reading it this year, and for the focus study that we had last week about Bereshit got me to thinking about this as kind of a cautionary tale about what is to be, in a sense, the mission of all of humanity and perhaps all of creation, which is creation starts off really as a building project. Nothing exists, and then all of a sudden everything exists. Things come into presence, trees and water and land and animals and human being. And we discussed last time how the very syntax and linguistics of the opening up of Genesis, in a sense, is an invitation for human beings to get the sense that this is not merely something that's being given to us to receive passively and to be passive dwellers within, that the language itself is hinting that we're being invited to become partners in creation, that we are to somehow emulate and mimic this power that has brought things into existence. And so we have this first story about Adam and Eve, where they seem quite content to do nothing, to just lie around and eat the fruit, and they're quite content to let some other power bring things into existence and to care for things. And it quickly becomes a cautionary tale that, well, that's really not a place where human beings are meant to dwell, in that land, in that dimension of passivity. And so that is what the story, in a sense, begins to teach that lesson. And then we get this new lesson here after this devastating flood, where human beings emerge and to start a new creation story, if you will, after the destruction of the flood. And they embark upon a construction project. Unlike Adam and Eve, they're ready to do something, they're ready to build. But what they build seems to be in contrary to what it is that the universe wants of them, because they build something that they describe as for our names. You know, if we don't do this, if we don't make a name for ourselves, we'll just be scattered about the earth. And so the Torah comes in and topples their construction project as a way to say, that's not what it means to be a builder. And so you have humanity has a lot to learn about the nature of what is this kind of procreation story and mission that we are to carry on. So to understand this a little bit more, it helped me to go back to Adam and Eve, to the Garden of Eden, and understand a little bit more about what happened there. And so that's what I have here in Numbers 2 and 3 on the study sheet. So when Adam and Eve engage in something that is somehow disruptive and disturbing to the force that brought everything into existence, we have words that are conveyed first to the woman and then to the man. To the woman, God said, I will greatly increase your suffering and your pregnancy. In pain shall you bear children. So our medieval commentator comes in and looks at this construct in this verse, and he says, okay, you have suffering in pregnancy, and you have pain in bearing children. So he sees three moments of pain and suffering. One is pain and suffering during pregnancy. One is pain and suffering during the actual moment of labor, of giving birth. And so then he looks at this other third reference to suffering and says, that refers to the pain of raising children. I wanted just to hold on to that for a moment, and then we'll get to the words that are expressed to Adam. To Adam, God said, cursed is the ground because of you. Through suffering shall you eat of it. So the word that's used for the word suffering, that's expressed both to Eve and to Adam, is the same word. You can see it here in the Hebrew, itzvonech, or for Adam, it's itzafon, this notion of atzav, this notion of suffering. They share, Adam and Eve share they are going to share this notion of suffering, but they'll share it differently. She through the raising of children, and Adam through the raising of food. So both Adam and Eve, in that sense, are initiated into a world in which their creative will meets inevitably with frustration. For Eve, what's being projected here is that the parental desire to give birth and to raise children, primarily as projections of themselves, runs up against the will of children who have their own will about what they want to do. Now, maybe there are no parents here participating in today's discussion that have never encountered this, who have always been able to raise children to be exactly like them, to have no contest of wills between parent and child. That's amazing. But those of us who have raised children have, I think, encountered in one form or another that we can't get our children to do always exactly what we want them to do. So that seems to be the level of frustration that is being expressed here with Eve, that the desire to create bumps up against a counter will by that which is being created. And here, for Adam, what's being expressed is the procreative desire to bring forth food from the earth is going to be frustrated by the earth having a will of its own about its own sense of what its rhythm should be and its own sense of what its topography is going to allow to be produced and so forth. So it's interesting here in the Hebrew, this tension between the expression of creativity and having a frustration with it is really conveyed by the Hebrew itself. But here in number 4, I have the word that is being used in both verse 16 and 17 for suffering, atzav, and on one meaning and one nuance of the word atzav is to hurt, to pain, grieve. But there's another nuanced meaning of the verb atzav, which is to shape or to fashion. So there seems to be some, linguistically, it captures this gap between creative desire and the frustration of that creative desire. So now we get to, what does Noach have to do with all this? So if you turn over the sheet, number 5 is a quote from our Torah portion. This one, meaning Noach, will provide us relief from our work and from the toil of our hands. So again, the word that's being used here for toil is the same word that was used to describe frustration and suffering and pain that in various ways Adam and Eve were going to experience. So Noach was to bring about, if you will, a reconciliation between creative will and desire and the capacity to realize it. At least that was his father's hope, that Noah would, in a sense, restore, if you will, a repair between creating and no longer having a frustration of that creative capacity. And then we get into the story, and what we see is that rather than bringing about a healing, Noah ushers in the most devastating experience that the earth had encountered until that moment, and perhaps forever. This is utter destruction of the earth. So what is happening here? What brings about the failure of the hope that Noah was to bring about a relief from the suffering that had been projected onto humanity? Well, the Zohar is quite clear that Noah is ultimately responsible for the flood. They call it, the Zohar calls this Noah's flood. And they say, essentially, he's responsible because he does nothing. He's responsible because all he does is wall himself up in this box to try and ride out the destruction that's occurring all around him. And the Zohar has this interesting concept and phrase that we have discussed previously when we have studied the whole Exodus story. The Zohar has God say something along the lines of, to the humanity that is destroying all of the earth, you want to repudiate the work of my hands? Very well, I shall fulfill your wish. We discussed this in the story of what was happening in Egypt with the Pharaoh. We noted that the Hebrew there makes it clear that all God was doing, at least at the very beginning, was honoring Pharaoh's own impulses to destroy, and was just not doing anything to frustrate Pharaoh's desire to do so. It wasn't until midway through the plagues that God eventually intervenes and says, and now I'm going to be doing something to your heart, rather than merely strengthening your capacity to do what you're going to do. So here we are, this notion that Noah was supposed to repair this breach that has happened, end the suffering and the toil, and instead only exacerbates things even more. And then we get to the emergence out of the flood, and lo and behold, what does humanity do? They build this tower that is designed, one, to insulate, isolate, and create barriers, and is only meant to make a name for themselves, rather than to create a dispersion across the earth, which is what humanity was supposed to do. This notion of the presumptive assertion of the human ego lies at the very heart of what is the tragedy that this story is trying to talk about with the Tower of Babel. And to try and find some way out of it, turn first to T.S. Eliot, who witnessed the destruction as a result of World War I of humanity and of civilization as he understood it. And he wrote poetry that one sought to reflect that and sought to begin to repair it somehow. And he was a revolutionary with his how he structured poetry, even as he was in many ways a very conservative and traditional person. So it's a very interesting combination of both a revolutionary art form and very conservative and traditional in his social habits. He wrote this: "The progress of an artist is a continual self-sacrifice, a continual extinction of personality." And from the early 20th century poet Paul Valéry, he wrote, "God made everything out of nothing, but the nothing shows through." And what Valéry did in his poetry was he was trying to create a language that would somehow access the nothing, because that's what he understood to be the richness, that if humanity could access that, then they wouldn't be so destructive. And he was trying to create a language that would get beyond the presumptively descriptive words that were in front of us, thinking that that was really getting in the way of our accessing what could be our salvation. So I have this little quote that's tried to give a sense of what he was all about. For Valéry, the goal of poetry was to invent a literature that could transmit nothing. He viewed language as deceptively determinative. The poem is supposed to open up a space for the object's nothingness to resonate with the nothingness inside the reader, rather than reader's ego or self or understanding. So the painting that I share with you this evening is by an artist who lived in New Zealand, was born in England, moved to New Zealand, and died just last year, Keith Morant. And this piece here in mixed media is called Enso for Bones. And Enso is a classic Zen Buddhist image, the circle there, which is designed to represent being and nothingness, the eternality of life, the continuity of existence. And what's interesting here in this particular one is that, unlike many traditional Japanese calligraphy designs of the Enso, which just has the circle, here Morant has introduced other shapes as well. He's introduced triangle, he's introduced square. I haven't delved into what that might mean, that he's introducing these other shapes in addition to the circle, but that would be interesting to ponder. But Morant, in addition to being an artist, was also a student of Zen Buddhism. And what he was particularly appreciative of through that particular spiritual practice was the sense that it gave him of what life is all about and what his role as an artist is all about. And he gained from it the sense that a self that's not blinded with desire or clothed in illusion, the sense that is the non-self of nature, as he put it, that's not controlled by human ego, the self that accepts the oneness of all existence. And so he wrote on his blog about what it meant to be an artist. He wrote, "To the artist, art is a verb. To the critic, it is a noun." And we've studied a little bit in past year about the artist Jackson Pollock. And for Jackson Pollock, what was on the canvas wasn't the artwork. What was on the canvas was a recording of the artwork, which was his dance and his movement around the canvas. And this notion that the true art is what we do, and that what's on the page is perhaps a pale attempt to record the true art that is happening. And this notion about what we do as being the actual practice rather than the structure that we might create is also captured here in our final commentary by the architect Toshiko Mori. Toshiko Mori is an architect in the East Coast, and she also teaches architecture at Harvard. And she and her husband have a home and garden on an island off the coast of Maine. And she wrote this about her gardening. I began to think of gardening as linked to my architectural practice. You plant a seed, it grows, and it's such a pleasure to see results so quickly. In the long terms, however, what's most important is cultivating a terroir. In architecture, the way we do that is by creating community. You have to have consensus, willingness, and investment. In that sense, I would argue that architecture is closer to agriculture than it is to industrial production. So here with Toshiko Mori, we're now bringing together, if you will, a construction project and agriculture. And her understanding that for both to succeed, you have to honor what is there. You can't just merely impose what you want to be there into the moment or into the place. You have to honor the topography, you have to honor the climate, you have to honor all the aspects within the environment if you want to be a good gardener. And like, if you want to be a good constructor, an architect of things, then you need to honor what is already there, which is the community and the desire to enhance the community. So this to me brought out what Torah is trying to teach us about what is the construction project we are to be engaged in. It's a construction project that's not driven by our ego. It's a construction project that seeks to build upon, that seeks to honor what we were given. And if we do that, if we honor what we were given, then we can create something that is nourishing and sustaining and beautiful. So with that, I'd love to hear what you encountered in the course of our reading of our portion, and you're thinking about this week's Torah portion. I'll call upon Jay and then others who have a hand up. Please go ahead, Jay, and then Rose.
Rabbi, thank you. There is so much here. First of all, for the uninformed or the previously uninformed, as I was 5 or 10 minutes ago, Enso is a sacred symbol in Zen Buddhism, meaning circle, or sometimes circle of togetherness. It is traditionally drawn using only one brushstroke as a meditative practice in letting go of the mind and allowing the body to create, as the singular brushstroke allows for no modifications. So it's a minimalistic thing. Okay, that's number one. This is not necessarily in order, Rabbi, and everyone listening. I noticed that Hashem needed a collaboration with humans, Noah and his family, in order to make things right on earth. And the word in the plural, I looked it up where he says, God says, we need to do this. Back, the footnotes are great in my text here. Back in Genesis, there's a God with his cadre of angels and all of the cadre in heaven who's saying, we need to do this. So even all of them couldn't fix what Hashem thought was wrong with the earth. He needed a man to do it. And he chose a eventual drunkard to do it. But that's beside the point. It says in here that God remembered Noah.
Yeah.
What if God had forgotten Noah? Because God is doing other things somewhere else in other worlds, other universes and all that. Oh, by the way, that guy's been floating on the top of the, how long did he float? Oh, gee, I just remembered him. It's like an afterthought. Oh, Noah, I forgot about him and all these animals. That was kind of interesting to me. Another factor was this. Now, I tried to search engine pitch or tar or whatever, and we know that this was in the Tigris Euphrates area somewhat, correct, Rabbi? Somewhere in that vicinity. Darn if the history of the Jewish people didn't run them from where we are in Israel's boundaries now up to the place where all this oil just bubbling up to the surface. I think history would have been a lot different if it had been that oil rich. I mean, I think of the La Brea tar pits. That's one of the richest oil fields ever discovered in that whole Southern California area. And the third thing I'll leave with is this. I have always heard and remembered, and you see photos, all of this, of a dove, the white dove. It's mentioned in everything from Bob Dylan to Kerouac to everyone. I always thought that was an entire twig or branch. It only says that the dove brought back a leaf. That's going to be my meditation for tonight. My mind is completely blissed. I thought it was this half a tree and olives. It was a leaf.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jay. Let me call upon Rose. And then
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, Jay, what you said about remembering is interesting because that happens all through the Torah. And even, it happens throughout the whole Tanakh. God remembered Sarah. God remembered Hannah in the book of Samuel 1. So I think that's saying that, you just have to be patient. God will get to you in the fullness of time. But, what you said about building and everything like that is very interesting. That puts me in mind of the spiritual. I'm working on a building. And it talks about, it's the Holy Ghost building. And what it is that you're working on an edifice, but it's also you're working on yourself. And that can be contrasted with the Tower of Babel, which was really just aggrandizement. And this is a similar story to, like the Greeks have Daedalus, people building stuff and getting, too big for their britches, and then they have a downfall. But what I wanted to focus on were the animals. And this was put to mind by something I heard on the radio. Robert Krulwich gave a talk in his shul about, the animals in the Noah story. Like, they didn't do anything bad. Why were they all wiped out? And it wasn't very fair. I mean, there were just two of them. But then the other thing that's kind of weird is that Noah offers a sacrifice right after they land. What animals did he sacrifice? There were only two of each. You get rid of one, you have a problem. Unless the female were already impregnated by the male and then they could kill the male. I don't know. But it seems to me that the animals got the really rough deal because it wasn't their fault. Maybe, and I was thinking maybe it was to teach us that as human beings, we are entrusted, in several places we are entrusted with the animals. Adam first named the animals and Noah saved the animals and now was allowed to eat their meat. But more than that, when we screw up, the whole planet gets screwed up. So that we have a great responsibility because all these animals died because we screwed up.
Thank you, Rose. Good. Thank you for bringing in that point. I really appreciate it. Let me call on Dave and then Kath and Richard here. Go, Dave Lieb, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it looks like God gets a touch of senioritis a couple of times during the Bible. But anyhow, what I really wanted to say was I'm looking at the flood, verse verse 11 in Genesis 7, where all the fountains of the great deep burst open and the floodgates of the sky broke open. And when I read that, it brought me back to creation, where we have the waters above and the waters below. And God separated the waters. So he's kind of backtracking on creation again when he brings his flood. So that's my thought about that one verse that I saw.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that because it's a fascinating thought. Let me call upon Kath and Richard, and then David, Susan, and Anna. Go ahead, Kath.
Thank you. One thing I did notice, because Rose, I was thinking the same thing about how can they keep, but in chapter 7, verse 2, it says, of every pure animal you shall take 7 pairs, males and their mates, and of every animal that is not pure, 2, a male and its mates. Of the birds of the sky also 7 pairs. So I think he accounted for the fact that he was going to do the sacrifice. However, I also really struggle with the animals, and I think of them as an example of those that are innocent that get hurt when things happen, like wars and fighting. The innocents are, I mean, we're dealing with that right now. There are many innocents that don't want to fight, don't hate. They just want to live their lives. And that's what's happening, is that many innocents also get killed. So it's like that, there's this responsibility. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that God says several times, God is not going to do this again. I'm not going to go this path again of the destruction. I will not do this again. To me, speaks to the fact that God is reconsidering the path that God took by the total destruction, and is thinking maybe that's not the way to go, and I'm making a covenant with you that I'm not going to do that again. So I think that's an example of not going that path of total destruction, or God would have said, yeah, I'm doing it again. So I thought that was an interesting aspect.
Thank you, Kath. I really appreciate that. And Richard, and Anna.
The thing that struck my heart was when God realizes that, okay, you're not going to speak the language because you don't know how to have a conversation. You only want to get on top of the situation, and the oligarchs are going to be up in the penthouse and manage capital. And so here we are with a brand new environment in which we have to relearn how to relate to one another by creating some kind of language. And I feel like, and there's a business of not being, they were happy because they didn't get stuck all over the world. Well, wait a minute, we've got Zionism and we've got a diaspora, and which one works to create democracy and justice in the world? And I just positive, I don't have the answer to that, but that brought out the conundrum of statehood versus putting up with diversity and learning to have conversation rather than debate, which has become kind of a blood sport. And lastly, this idea of a permaculture where the buildings are out like sukkah, they're open, like Abraham's tent, not isolated and ready to fall over because there's no foundation that gets money coming down to the masses and equitable distribution, but corporations build straight up and there's no room for conversation. And I think this particular portion with Noah, which is we're just ending the myth, and then we'll get into the real people, Abraham and so forth. But this is really the archetype of what faces us as a species, and we're facing it right now. And I hope it brings about some better understanding of how the present paradigm we live in, the present existential situation, how we're going to negotiate this thing that's going on now in Haiti, in Israel, in Gaza, in Syria, in England, in Scotland, all over the world where hate is rampant, and the ability to transcend that and be open to some spiritual understanding where love and compassion for our fellow human beings comes in is being truncated and aborted in the schools, because kids are growing up now taking sides and having outfits and guns. And I think we're on the threshold of both damnation and of getting the wisdom to change our architecture, to do permaculture, to start loving. Anyway, that's what this brought for me today.
Thank you so much, Richard. Anna?
This is a small piece about remembering. Instantly made me think of knowing. If you know something, you know something, then you can remember something, right? Or what you remember is something you have known. And in Torah, many times to know is to have intimate congress with. To know means more than just something in your head. It means a very intimate closeness with another being. So if you're remembering something, we sort of tend to think of it, oh, it's something I forgot, a mental breakdown, blah, blah, blah. But it could also be to come back to that. Or like when you remember, when you put someone's hand back on, part of our body is a member, to remember, to re-put back together.
Thank you so much. And thank you. Let me call upon June. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share with us.
This might be very simplistic, but
let me just, I'm so sorry, I apologize. To remember, of course, when God remembers someone, God is coming. It's not that God went away anywhere. It's that God is coming closer again. That's what, it's the intimacy, right? Okay, it's always been there.
Thank you. Excuse us, June. Please.
Excuse me, June.
What bothers me the most here is, and this is simplistic, is that Noah just goes with his family. Supposedly, everyone else on the earth is wiped out. Yet, he's expected to be fruitful and multiply and populate the entire earth. With whom? It's not enough people, and knowing what we know about inbreeding, they couldn't have inbred. So I'm just wondering, were there other creatures around? Well, maybe not the entire world was destroyed. Maybe there was other sections that they then met other people. I just can't see how 6 or 8 people can populate the world. And that bothers me.
Wow, June, I never thought this before. So thank you very much for causing me to reflect on this and to have a new understanding, which is perhaps there were millions of people around at the time, but people were but perhaps Noah and others like him were just oblivious. We're not even aware of the existence of other people because of how self-focused they were. And the tragedy is that to this day, with the billions who live on this planet, all too often, we are completely oblivious to the existence of others. So focused are we on our own, not only survival and welfare, but of promoting ourselves, and are just blind to those around us, sometimes even blind to those within our own family. So one thing that David Lieb also got me to think about was in his reference to going back to the waters above and the waters below, and how this is acting as an undoing of all that. When the rabbis talk about, in the Talmud, they talk about that which exists below the waters. They're not referring so much to the physical topography of what's underneath the seawater. They're talking about the human psyche. that they understand, they understood that there were forces driving human beings in their actions that they weren't fully conscious of. And before Freud came along 2,000 years later, and developed the notion of the unconscious, the rabbis understood this, and that's what they were talking about when they say the forces below the waters. So if that's the case, then maybe there are forces above the waters as well. Maybe that's our super consciousness. And it's good that we need to have both, I guess. We need to have these drives deep within us, and then these drives that we're very cognitively aware of. And when any one of them is supreme, maybe it doesn't work out so well. And there needs to be an ecology, if you will, within each one of us, of our internal drives, as well as our rational, controlled thought. And that got me to thinking about where we ended up in terms of our bit of study here, which is that what Torah describes in the story of creation is an integrated ecosystem. And Kabbalah comes along and says that integrated ecosystem that's described in story of creation is not just something that exists outside of us. We have an integrated ecosystem within us as well. All these different attributes and emotions and capacities, which are sometimes in conflict with one another, sometimes balancing out one another, that the role of a human being, if you will, yes, we need to take care of the ground and the ecosystem that's out there, that's external to us, but we also need to take care of the internal ecosystem as well and maintain that in balance as well. So let me invite Robert to bring us home with some beautiful words.
Just mine is very brief, and I just love the conversation. There's so many ways to look at this, but the one thing that really struck me, we just finished Deuteronomy, and in Leviticus as well, we see very strong language, the covenant, and here we have at the beginning the concept of covenant. I think it's just so easy to miss that, this idea that God has expectation and trust, and on the other hand, we have to respond to that. I remember many years ago seeing two rainbows in the sky. And I, of course, thought of the covenant. And I think if you're familiar with the Baha'i faith, there are two founders of the Baha'i faith. And I saw them in that. But whenever I see a rainbow, that's the covenant. It's always reminding us. And whatever else we see in the Torah, to my mind, that's the heart. No matter how we understand it, does it lift us up? Does it draw us closer? Do we acquire humility? And I'm just repeating what all of you have said. Does it spiritualize and transform us? And by the way, I got online to see this architect. Wow, does she do some, thank you for the exposure. You know, listen, there are brains out there that I can't even understand.
Robert, she does beautiful work. She's done beautiful work throughout the world, including in Africa. It's always meant to be an honoring of what she encounters rather than her bringing something to impose upon an environment or a culture. I want to thank everyone for your investment and your engagement and your heartfelt words. The Torah as a work of art, as we have discussed what it means to be an artist and what it means to be a work of art, Torah as a work of art is an unfinished work of art. And it requires us as its readers to add to it. And that is really the art, how we live. And hopefully we leave behind us in our wake some artifacts that represent what our intentions were, as well as what we were able to accomplish. I want to thank each and every one of you for being beautiful artists, helping to make a better world and a better internal world for yourselves as well. God bless you all. Look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Good night. Much love.
Thank you.
Mhm.